Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on the SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loans for COVID-19. Today's webinar is hosted by the Mohawk Valley Small Business Development Center, and your presenter is Center Director Roxanne Mutchler. We also have Zach from the Mohawk Valley SBDC joining us to help me moderate the chat. He'll be sending out any links referenced in the chat section of your panel. I'm your moderator, Renee Goodnow from the New York SBDC. I wanted to give a quick thank you to today's co-sponsors, Berkshire Bank. And I also wanted to let everyone know that we'll be taking questions at the end of Roxanne's presentation. And again, thank you for joining us today. I will turn things over to Roxanne.
Thank you, Renee, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on the SBA's disaster loans for you, those of you affected by the coronavirus. I'm sure there's many of you on the line today that have been affected. There's been an awful lot of information going around. We've had a lot of questions, and as a lot of you know, things have been changing sometimes from day to day, especially since this past Friday when the stimulus bill was passed. So today we really hope to clarify things for you as to exactly what is available to help you get through this crisis. A quick shout out to our Think colleagues, Ryan and Stacy, and our economic development partners, our banking partners, chambers, and others. We all are working really hard to provide you with the accurate information, and we will continue to do that. I know many of our resource partners are on this live webinar, and we appreciate partnering with you to help the small businesses in our community. As Renee said, a special thank you to our co-sponsor today, Berkshire Bank. Matt Nickel, he's the Vice President of Business Banking at Berkshire. We've worked with Matt and his colleagues for many years, and they're great partners and will be a great resource to you should you decide to pursue a loan under the Paycheck Protection Program, which we'll be discussing today. So thanks, Matt, and all of you at Berkshire Bank. Here's what our plan is for today. Some of you attended last week's webinar on the EIDL program. You can get up and get a quick cup of coffee if you like. The first few slides will be a review, but don't go far because the online portal to apply for that particular loan did change over the weekend. And we've included the new portal and some slides. We'll demo that for you. I know many of you are very interested in the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, and I don't blame you. It's another great program that can really help you potentially to get through this period and hopefully keep your employees or rehire them real soon. So just as a recap, as you know, the disaster declaration for New York State was declared on March 19th. And then the Paycheck Protection Program was approved as part of the CARES Act just this past Friday, March 27. So the CARES Act is an acronym for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. So you can actually apply for both programs if, and here's the caveat, you use the funds for different expenses. So note, that is a change from what we had told you last week. We had said you could only apply for one or the other. But since the stimulus bill passed, we've now learned that you can apply for both programs. So that's a great thing. So let's get started with all of the particulars. These slides pertaining, we're going to start, as you saw in the agenda, with the economic injury disaster loan. So all of these next few slides are going to have the EIDL right in the title so that you can know right away we're talking about the EIDL program. So they are working capital loans available to you to help you get through these next few months. And businesses have to be directly affected by the disaster, or a business that you work with that was directly affected by the disaster. Other businesses, even indirectly related, will most likely qualify as well. You must be a small business to apply. So more than 98% of all of the businesses in the United States are small businesses. So I bet my life that 98% of you are small businesses that are listening today. Here are other types of businesses that are eligible. Independent contractors, we've had a lot of questions about this, and they can apply. Cooperatives and employee-owned businesses, all nonprofits, including faith-based organizations. And this is new as well. You're going to find when we get to the Paycheck Protection Program, it's going to be a little different for the nonprofits, but for the EIDL, all nonprofits, including faith-based organizations. And those faith-based organizations, they are eligible to apply for any public service or secular operations that they may have. So if there's questions on that, just let us know and we'll research whether or not you are eligible if you're a nonprofit or, a faith-based organization that's a nonprofit. So again, you must have suffered working capital losses, meaning you've seen your sales decrease or your business isn't operating specifically because of the pandemic. And I didn't mention the tribal small businesses as well. So being a small business is very, very important. You have to be a small business or one of those other types of businesses that I just mentioned on the previous slide. So I just want to, as a quick review, if some of you are wondering and you want to make sure that you are a small business, the easiest way to do it is to first identify what your NAICS code is. If you're not familiar with that, that's an acronym that stands for North American Industrial Classification System. And they're codes that describe a business. So I've given you the website here. It's actually the census website where you can look up your NAICS code. And then you can go to this neat tool that SBA, just within the last year or two, developed. You go to the website for the size standards lookup tool, and you just put that code in there, and it'll give you the size standard for that code. So if your business exceeds that size standard, then you are no longer a small business, according to the SBA and the federal government. Good thing to look up sometime, just so you know, the NAICS codes are used for a lot of different portals, and even the states now are getting where they're using the NAICS codes as well. So let's talk about who is not eligible for the EIDL program. Barns and farms are not eligible as they come under the U.S. Department of Agriculture. But, and this is something new, the CARES Act does include some provisions which benefit farmers, including a $14 billion increase in the USDA's borrowing authority under the Commodity Credit Corporation, consistent with a long history of the CCC being tapped to support agriculture in times of crisis, and $9.5 billion to assist specialty crop producers, direct retail farmers, and livestock operators. So my thanks to our business advisor, Shelby Sweet, for getting me a little bit more information pertaining to agricultural enterprises. If you are an ag business, we can do some further checking to see if you would potentially be eligible for EIDL, but if not, there are, thanks to the CARES Act being enacted, some additional support and resources potentially for you. Since this is a federal program, religious organizations generally don't qualify. Charitable organizations, gambling concerns, casinos and racetracks. And it's not up here, but cannabis companies won't qualify because their business is still considered illegal on the federal level. So this is something we've been looking at for a long time because we've had people wanting to get into businesses, cannabis type businesses. And so unfortunately, they will not qualify. So let's talk about the criteria for a loan approval. So now the EIDLs can be approved by the SBA based solely on an applicant's credit score. Up until last week, you had to supply, tax returns and things other than your credit score came into play in determining if you were approved for a loan. But now we are told that it could be based solely on your credit score. You'll see in a few minutes that there isn't a place in the application to upload anything. You don't have to upload any tax returns or any other forms. So that's a good thing. But even if your credit score is on the low side, we encourage you to apply anyway. When I looked into this a little bit more, I read that the SBA can use an appropriate alternative method for determining an applicant's ability to repay. So it may not be a deal breaker if your credit score is low. I'm not sure what they mean by an appropriate alternative method, but I did hear that the SBA administrator, his name is Mr. Contreras, he actually said that a prior bankruptcy doesn't disqualify you. So that's really good news. As far as repayment, the SBA will determine that you have the ability to repay. So that's a big part of the criteria. As far as eligibility, you do have to be physically located in a county of New York State. You cannot be a P.O. box. You'll see that very shortly. So how much can you borrow and what are the interest rates? So loans can be approved up to $2 million. It depends on the size and the type of your business. The interest rate is fixed for the life of the loan. The maximum rate, as you see there, 3.75%. And the law authorizes loan terms of up to 30 years. So the terms are going to be determined on a case-by-case basis, and that will be based on your ability to repay. So it's the SBA that's actually going to determine the appropriate installment payment based on your finances and your financial condition, and that's also going to determine the loan term. How can you use the loan funds? A lot of questions on this. The loans, let me specify again, are not intended to replace sales or profits. The loans are for working capital. That you're losing for either having lost customers or having to shut down. So fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, and any other bills that you would have had in these next few months to pay to keep your business running. So since the payments are deferred for 4 months, your first payment won't be due until the 5th month. And I added possibly longer to the slide because we're still trying to narrow this down. You'll see with the other program, it's the deferrals longer. And we've heard that it could, the lender could actually extend the payments, the deferral time as well, but we're still not totally sure on this. So we know for sure that payments are going to be deferred for the 4 months. So just know that that could be extended. So this is brand new. The SBA waived any personal guarantee on advances and loans below $200,000. So this is a great thing because last week, you were going to have to provide collateral, but no more. If it's going to be under 200,000, no collateral. No, you don't need a personal guarantee. Anything over 200,000, though, the SBA may require a personal guarantee. So some of you have already found it. There's a new website now to apply. The funds for an EIDL loan, they come directly from the U.S. Treasury. So banks are not involved with this program. You would go to this website. I encourage you to bookmark it and take a look at it. It went live actually sometime over the weekend. Yesterday morning, it was live. So I'm not sure exactly what time, but it was over the weekend. And as I said, we'll show you some screenshots. No costs, fees to apply. You can actually have another existing SBA disaster loan. It still qualify for the EIDL, but they will have to be kept separate loans. There's no obligation to take the loan if you are offered one. If you apply and are approved, you're under no obligation to take the loan. So that's it for this slide. We'll now go into the screenshots of the application. There's 18 of them. They're very simple, pretty self-explanatory. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. You can actually go to the portal yourself or review these slides at your leisure. So here's an overview of the steps that you'll go through. There's a few slides associated with each one of these steps. And let's take a look at them. The first one is eligible entity verification. So you're checking which applies to you. You must review and check all of the following. If you can't check all of these, you are not an eligible entity for the EIDL. Next couple slides are pertaining to your business's information. You can see how easy this is. I really do like this portal. I've had a few people go through and do it, and they've had no issues whatsoever. So this is just so much more simplified than the very first portal that some of you saw, which was pretty much a nightmare. This is very easy. Gross revenues for the 12-month period prior to the date of the disaster, and cost of goods sold for the 12-month period prior to the date of the disaster. So those will be important for you to maybe research ahead of time before going to the portal and actually applying. Rental properties, any lost rents due to the disaster, nonprofit cost of operations, combined annual operating expenses for the 12 months prior to the date of the disaster for all secular social services provided by the faith-based entity. So that would pertain just to the faith-based entities. I'm not going to go over each and every single question here. This again is just pertaining to your business. Where is it located? Very important that your email be entered here, the correct email, because that's what they're going to use to communicate with you. The date your business was established, current ownership, business activity. And now the business owner's information, just your first name for this slide. All required information. All required information. You can add an additional owner if you need to. Additional information. You will have to answer these questions. Click yes or no. We know from our SBA guidelines for working with clients that if they've been suspended or debarred from contracting with the federal government, that is a deal breaker for us to be able to work with them. So I'm hoping that none of you are on that list, the debarment list. Yeah, that could be a deal breaker. So this slide I put in here, this is what a lot of people are asking about, and this was what was included in the CARES Act this past Friday, the Economic Injury Grant, or Emergency Economic Injury Grant, I should say. So this is a grant to provide you with an advance of $10,000 for small businesses and not-for-profits that have been harmed by COVID-19. You will get the grant within 3 days of applying for the EIDL. So the funds are made available within 3 days of your application, and it's a loan advance that will not have to be repaid. The grants are actually backdated to January 31 to allow those of you who have already applied for EIDLs to be eligible to also receive a grant. And at this point, I think I'll mention that those that did apply last week at the former portal, you should have received an email from the SBA telling you that your application was received. But we're telling people to go to this new portal and apply, because it's at this new portal where you actually click that you want to apply for the grant. And here it is. There's a little checkbox here. I know it's hard to see, where it says, I would like to be considered for an advance of up to $10,000. You'll want to click that. So I've told my clients that have already gone through this and gone through the prior procedure of uploading a whole bunch of documents. I've told them to take the time to come to this website and go through each page, and this way they will be eligible for the grant. I've had the question come up several times, do I have to give my bank information? And you do. This is where they're going to send you that grant money. You have to give your bank name, routing number, and your account number. But the information, of course, is all all very secure and confidential. So this is something that you're attesting to. I hereby certify under penalty of perjury under the laws of the United States that any proceeds of the economic injury disaster loan or grant will only be used to provide secular social services to the general public. I have the authority to make this certification, and all that of the foregoing is true and correct. So you all should certainly, take the time to read the whole slide before clicking next. And then this is a summary page. We're almost to the end here. Review all of the information to make sure it's all accurate. This was just a dummy client that we had. Kate from our Albany SBDC was kind enough to give us these screenshots. And then this is actually the last slide. You're going to click submit after you've clicked I'm not a robot. Click submit and you are done. And I actually have a screenshot. One of my clients sent this to me. When did she do this? It must have been yesterday. You will be given this success slide telling you your application was submitted, and it will give you the application number. It will also tell you that you'll be notified through your email address if they want any more information from you in order to process your application. So do write down that application number. Couple notes here: if you've already received an EIDL loan, you would be able to refinance that into the Paycheck Protection Program for loan forgiveness purposes. So that's where we're going to go in just a moment. However, as I said, you cannot take out an EIDL and a Paycheck Protection Program loan for the same purposes. So that's it. Not really very difficult at all. I hope you're pleased to see that it looks very streamlined. Here is the link to get in touch with us if you need assistance. What Zach's been doing from our office, he's just been fabulous. I know a lot of you have been talking to him. If you call, he's been sending out a lot of information and then asking you to let us know if you need one-on-one assistance or if you have any questions. So we cover the Mohawk Valley SBDC, Oneida, Madison, and Herkimer counties. But if you're calling from outside those counties, just click on that bottom link. I'm sure there's an SBDC near you. We've got 22 centers all around the state. So you can click on that second link and your request will be directed to the SBDC nearest you. Our research network in Albany has on their web page, this is the statewide link to our SBDC network. There is a link for guidance and resources, and they are endeavoring to keep this up to date with the newest information as we get it. Here are the phone number and the email for the SBA's Customer Service Center. So you're certainly welcome to try and get through there. Last week it was hard to get through, but I'm sure that's going to improve as they get ramped up for this program. So that's it. We actually are ready to go into part 2. So we're doing pretty good here. I'll go over all the specifics and let's get going here. For these slides, I've put the PPP on every slide at the top in the title so that, again, you can kind of differentiate this from the EIDL. So just to give you an overview, as I mentioned, the CARES Act approved on Friday. That's an estimated $2 trillion package. So it specifically allots $10 billion for the EIDLs and $349 billion for this particular program called the Paycheck Protection Program. So you must certify in good faith that the funds are needed for COVID-19 related purposes, that the funds will be used to retain workers or rehire, and that your request is not duplicative with other SBA funds for the same purpose. So that was a fancy way of saying, as I said, you can't use these funds for the same reasons that if you were to go for the EIDL loan. I'm going to go through the same type of information, who's eligible, how do I apply, etc. So let's start out again with who's eligible. And for the PPP, small businesses with 500 employees or less, or if the size standard for your business is higher than 500 employees. You have to have been operational by February 15. I actually saw something come through yesterday where somebody wanted information and wanted to apply, and they hadn't actually started yet. It didn't look like they'd started yet. So you actually have to have been operational by February 15. Sole proprietors, independent contractors, and other self-employed individuals. So again, you are eligible also. Though for this program, only the 501c3 nonprofits or the 501c19 veteran organizations qualify for this. So I'm not sure why they did not pass it for all nonprofits. I know that some of our legislators were pushing for that, but it just did not get approved. And then again, the tribal business concerns as well. Businesses in the hospitality and restaurant industries with less than 500 employees with a NAICS code that begins with 72. So that 72 NAICS code is for accommodations and food services. Franchises that are approved by the SBA's franchise directory with less than 500 employees. And small businesses that receive funding or financing through a small business investment company program. Those are privately owned and managed investment funds that are licensed and regulated by the SBA. So if you're not sure, again, if your business is eligible to apply, contact us and we will be glad to research that for you. What are the eligible expenses? Very similar to EIDLs, payroll support, such as employee salaries and paid, sick, or medical leave, insurance premiums, mortgage payments, rent, and utility payments, all are eligible under this program. How much can you borrow? In this case, you can potentially qualify for loans up to $10 million. So that's huge. Maximum interest rate, just 4%. And again, no borrower or lender fees. You can apply for this program if you have credit elsewhere. There in the past used to be a caveat that if you had plenty of good credit, you were qualified for some programs, but that is not true for this program. And I actually had somebody who, asked a question. They have a line of credit and open and a large line of credit, and so fortunately they'll be able to consider this program even though they have credit already. There are no prepayment fees or penalty, so that's good too. The loan amounts are based on your previous payroll costs that your business has incurred. And they have some type of a formula to determine and come up with what that loan amount will be. This is important. You're eligible to apply just until June 30. And you apply for this program through a bank. It's an SBA lender bank. And apparently there's going to be some non-bank lenders approved by the SBA and the US Treasury that will also be able to help you. So they will be the ones to process and approve your application. We've talked with a few of our resource partners that are our banking partners, and they don't yet have all of the specifics yet for this. Yesterday, my husband saw online the US Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin was quoted at Fox Business as saying, "These loans will be available starting on Friday. We hope later today," which was yesterday, "we'll be releasing the documents and instructions." Beginning Friday, Mnuchin said owners can go to any existing Small Business Administration lender, as well as any FDIC insurance institution, credit union, or financial technology lender, that has signed up for the program for relief. So we generally, if you have, hopefully all of you have a bank that you have a relationship with, it could very well be that they are already an SBA lender. They will, in the next day or two, get the details that you will need to work with them to apply for this program. So for this program, the loan payments will be deferred for 6 months, and the lender can actually extend that for another 6 months. So that's potentially a year where you would not have to make any payments. Collateral, there is no collateral or personal guarantee requirement. This is a beautiful thing. The SBA 100% guarantees the loan through the end of December. Now, these next few slides, we're going to cover about loan forgiveness. And there's been a lot of questions on this, so we're trying to make it as simple as we can, because it's been a little difficult to understand this process. But here's what I know a lot of you have been waiting to hear. So the CARES Act established that the PPP borrower is eligible for loan forgiveness equal to the amount spent by the borrower during an 8-week period after the origination of the PPP loan. You will have to provide documentation to the lender, and you can choose which 8-week period you want to count towards the covered period. So some additional notes that I have are that in order for the amounts to be forgiven for these payroll costs, you must maintain the same average number of employees for the 8-week period. So the 8-week period may be applied to any time frame between February 15 and June 30, or January 1st until February 15. You won't be penalized for a reduction in employment or wages during that period from February 15th to April 26th if you rehire employees that you previously laid off or restore any decrease in wages or salaries by June 30. So if you don't meet these requirements, the amount forgiven is reduced. So this is something that you'll have to take a close look at to determine, number one, do you want to pursue this, and what would be your 8-week period that you'll be wanting to have expenses forgiven. So here are expenses that are eligible for forgiveness. As I said, payroll costs up to a maximum of $100,000. Mortgage payments, if the mortgage was incurred prior to February 15. Interest payments on the mortgage incurred prior to February 15. Payment of rent or lease. Payment on any utility for which the service began before February 15. You can use the PPP for other business-related expenses, such as inventory, but that portion of the loan would not be forgiven. If you keep all of your employees, the entirety of the loan will be forgiven. If you already laid off some employees, you can still be forgiven for the full amount of your payroll cost if you rehire them by June 30. So I had somebody call me yesterday, and he was laying out a plan, wanted our advice on, they when to bring them back and how to do it, and that's something that we could certainly work with you to look at different options. So let's read that second point: to encourage employers to rehire any people you've already laid off. Borrowers that rehire workers previously laid off will not be penalized for having a reduced payroll at the beginning of the period. And the maximum amount that can be forgiven may not exceed the principal amount of the loan. So you're going to receive a handout. Zach actually attached it to a special email that we sent out last night. We normally only send out our newsletter once a week, but Zach worked really late last night to get an email out to everyone, and he attached I think he attached or gave you a link to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's guide called the Small Business Guide and Checklist. And that could be helpful to you in calculating your average monthly payroll costs so that you can decide what you want to do. So when we send you the follow-up email after today's webinar, we'll include some handouts for you. So the loan is forgiven at the end of the 8-week period. So how do you get the loan forgiven? You have to actually make a request to the lender for forgiveness of the loan, as I said earlier, by providing documentation of payments made under the covered period. So it's going to be vitally important that you be organized and have your records in order. The lender will then have 60 days to review and approve your request. Anything not forgiven or repaid by December 31 converts to a maximum 10-year loan at a maximum rate of 4%. And SBA will still guarantee that loan 100%. So as far as documentation goes, some notes I jotted down were payroll tax filings, proof of lease payments, proof of mortgage payments, proof of utility payments. They will accept bank statements, canceled checks to prove that you made those payments. If you do receive a PPP loan or refinance an EIDL into a PPP loan, any advance amount received under the Emergency Economic Injury Grant Program, that was the EIDL, would be subtracted from the amount forgiven in the PPP. So that concludes the PPP slides. I've got one more that I threw in here for those of you who have an existing SBA loan. The CARE Act actually provides for a 6-month loan payment subsidy for you on your existing SBA loans made prior to March 27. So if you have an SBA 7A loan or a 504 or even a micro loan, SBA will pay the principal, interest, and any associated fees that are owed on the loan for a 6-month period, starting on the next payment due. Isn't that fantastic? Loans that are already on deferment will receive 6 months of payment by the SBA, beginning with the first payment after the deferral period. SBA must make the payments no later than 30 days after the date on which the first payment is due. And SBA is required to still make payments even if the loan was sold on the secondary market. SBA is encouraging lenders to provide deferments and allows lenders up until 1 year after enactment to extend the maturity of an SBA loan that's in deferment beyond the existing statutory limits. So we've talked with a lot of you. We've encouraged you, especially those that are in a very, very difficult situation right now, to contact all of your partners that have provided loans to you. So not just the the SBA loans that you have, but really any loan that you have. A lot of our resource partners have been in touch with us to give us the specifics on what they're doing to help you if you are one of their clients, and they are deferring payments in a lot of cases and coming up with other concessions that are going to help you get through this difficult time. So do check with your current lender to see. I'm sure that they will be glad to work with you. So I hope you have found this helpful. This is where we stand at this moment. I can't guarantee it'll change tomorrow based on our experience since last Thursday, but this is where we're at today, and we'll open it up for your questions.
Roxanne, I really appreciate it. And we definitely have a lot of questions that came
Oh boy.
in. If for some reason I don't get to your question during this Q&A, we'll definitely follow up with you after. Roxanne's office has been really great about that because we've definitely not been able to cover all of the questions during past Q&As just because there's been so many. And some of them are really specific, and it might make sense to go to Roxanne's office or another SBDC center. We have a few questions come in on eligibility for the EIDL and the PPP. Can you quickly jump back to that section to go over who is eligible?
So those are the beginning slides, who is eligible. For the EIDL, which I'll go over first, remember that's an acronym for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. You have to be affected by the disaster in some way, either directly your own business or a business that you do business with. So that's important. The types of businesses, you have to be small. We've been told of sole proprietorships, independent contractors. They use the term gig contractor, I think it was called. You know, if you just do gigs, but it's probably an independent contractor. Cooperatives, all nonprofits for the EIDL, all nonprofits, and tribal small businesses. This was the website to look up your size standard to make sure that you are small. I'm sure that you are small. The only time this could be a concern is if you have an affiliation with other businesses, and the SBA takes those into consideration to determine if you exceed the size standards. So that's what that affiliation guide is that I put there. You know, I didn't mention that earlier because it really doesn't pertain to most people. But the ineligible businesses for the EIDL were the ag businesses, religious organizations, charitable organizations, gambling concerns. These are usually, SBA usually does always have these ineligible types of businesses, not ag, but, well, actually ag usually does go through different way to get loans and assistance. So I think that might be it for EIDL. So those were the eligibility criteria for the EIDL. Let's go down back to PPP. Small business with 500 employees or less, or if the size standard of your business is higher than 500. Same thing, sole proprietors, independent contractors, and other self-employed individuals. The only difference for PPP is that it isn't all nonprofits that are eligible. It's just the 501c3s and the 501c19 veteran organizations and the tribal concerns as well. This is just another page too on businesses that are eligible to apply, and I think that was it. Yeah, so that was it. So if there's a question about whether you're eligible or not, just let us know and we'll check it out for you.
Roxanne, do you know the difference between a faith-based organization and a religious organization? For example, are religious nonprofit camps or conference centers, not churches, eligible?
I don't have the answer to that. Somebody explained it to me that if they, and I don't know where they got this from, but if they provide some kind of a business service, they could be eligible. But I really should get more information before I try and answer that, because I would just be guessing. But I definitely would ask, the first question I would ask is, how are they formed? Are they a 501c3 or a 501, chambers are 501c6s, I'm told. So that would be my first question, is how are they categorized?
Check. Does the SBA go by personal and business credit score?
Well, from what we've read, it is the personal credit score. But if you don't really have a way to add information on this portal that you want the reviewer to review, but you certainly could do an email referencing your application number if you wanted to provide additional information that you weren't able to at the portal. I've said last week that if a credit score is really low for a valid reason, that might be something that you want to make known to the reviewer ahead of time so they can take that into consideration. That might come under that category that I mentioned about, generally they want to get these loans approved and out there into the economy. So they've tried to streamline this whole process, and that's why people are not being asked for all this other additional information that they were last week. So they're going a lot by the credit score, but they really want to make the loans to the small businesses. So if there are extenuating circumstances, I certainly would get known so that they could potentially still be approved. That actually is a question, Renee, that I would encourage everyone to discuss with their, well, actually, this is the EIDL, so it's not the PPP. For the PPP, if there's situations like that where there's an issue with the credit score, they will want to talk with their bank about it. Hopefully the bank already knows that person's situation. If they don't, they would want to make the banker know about it. But for EIDL, I really, that's a good question to find out how we would give additional information, because you have to really follow that web portal in the order that those pages come up, and I didn't really see a space for extra information.
Is there a list of currently qualified SBA lenders for PPP?
There is going to be, we know who the SBA lenders are locally. It could be expanded from what I've been reading to other entities that aren't currently SBA lenders. So we are going to get a list, and we'll absolutely give that out as soon as we get it. We will give that out. So you probably, if you're on our email newsletter distribution list, you've seen how these last couple of weeks, all we've put out is information about recovering from this disaster, and Zach will continue to keep the focus on helping our small business people with whatever resources we find. And we're all, as I said at the beginning, we're all sharing information. So when Edge finds out something and they put it out there, you know, we'll share what they found out, and others. You know, I think it might have been the Clinton Chamber that was the first to give us that U.S. Chamber of Commerce small business guide. It came through several people, but we're all working together to just analyze the information that's out there, and we're trying to be very, very careful and making sure that accurate information is put out there. So to get back to the question, as soon as we have that list, we'll definitely communicate it. Hopefully that person's current bank will be in a position to help them, and if not, we'll have other recommendations we can give them.
Speaking of all these different acronyms, we've had a few questions come in. Is there a good place to look up all of them? For example, the SBA bridge loan, the PPP, all that information?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, when I started in government contracting, I used to have bookmarked an acronym website, and I'd have to look up what that is, but there's actually a website where you can look up acronyms. I'd have to look in my records to see what that one was that I used to utilize, but I would just do a Google search for an acronym directory, or just email us and we'll explain whatever the acronym is. I know it's hard sometimes because there are so many acronyms used. But we have been seeing the EIDL and the PPP to identify these two programs. So that's why I put them on all the slides.
Thank you. We have a few questions. Can you review the 8-week period section? When does it start and end?
So the 8-week period, it really is up to the small business what 8-week period they would like to use. And let me just review again what those options were. The 8-week period may be applied to any time frame between February 15th and June 30, or from January 1 until February 15th. So basically from January 1st to June 30, any 8-week period could be determined by the small business owner to be the period that they're going to use. So they're going to, you know, have to look at, you know, how long they kept their employees on if they did end up having to lay them off. SBA will want to compare to the prior year, you know, what their level of employment was the previous year, and wages the previous year. You know what I'm going to refer people to is there's another handout that actually, I think I mentioned it during the webinar, it actually gives you some scenarios and gives you a way to do some analysis on your own. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, that small business guide and checklist by the U.S. Chamber has some examples of how to calculate your average monthly payroll costs to determine how much you can actually borrow. So I'm going to refer people to that because it gets a little complicated. There's payroll costs that can be included and excluded payroll costs as well.
Sounds good. We had to mention the SBA lender match will give a list of bankers. So thank you, Beth, for sharing that.
Oh, good point. I should add that, definitely.
Do you know if interest accrues during the deferral period?
It does not.
How do they determine losses not yet realized? For example, lost rents caused by COVID-19 in future months.
So was that on a, let me take a look if that was on a slide. What I've told people last week, as far as that goes, is they're going to have to just project losses, but let me just see, make sure that that was in this new application. You know, I did not see, and maybe I missed it, but I'm not seeing that they're having to submit that. I know last week they did, but I'm not seeing that they're asking for that. So they want gross revenues for the 12 months prior to the date of the disaster. They want cost of goods sold for the 12 months prior to the date of the disaster. Operating expenses for the 12 months prior to the date of the disaster. Oh, that's for the faith-based. Well, if they are asked, let's say the reviewer does come back and ask for additional information, which could happen, they are going to have to take a look, like I said, at their history of operating expenses and everything, payroll expenses and all that, and then be able to project what their losses are going to be for the next few months or the next, however, 3-4 months. We can help them with that if they need help with that. But basically, the SBA is going to take the information that's been provided by the business owner, and they're actually going to come back with a loan amount that they will authorize and approve. So I did see that if perchance somebody takes out a loan and they end up needing more, they can go back and apply for more. But for the EIDL, the SBA reviewer will determine what the loan amount is going to be based on the financials provided. They might have been talking about PPP. So again, we can certainly help them with that. Sorry.
We did have a few questions come in on why they weren't able to request a specific amount for the EIDL, and you just answered that, so thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If a business has cost of revenue but not cost of goods sold, where do they put those other expenses?
See, there isn't a place on this new application to put that. I don't know. We'll have to get back to them on that.
Do you know if applications are editable after they're submitted?
I don't see a way to do that. I don't believe there is a way because you just get the message that your application was approved and your application number. I think if somebody wanted to edit it, they should email the customer service email address, noting their application number and explaining that they'd like to make an edit. And then too, once they get an assigned SBA reviewer, they will be in touch with that reviewer and can potentially make some changes.
What are you using for date of disaster? Someone mentioned on your screen, there's some dates. The 31st is on there.
There it is. Thank you who pointed that out. January 31. Thank you. Yes.
In comparing EIDL to PPP, if we thought we'd be able to keep all of our employees and we were able to get a loan bigger than the 10K grant and the EIDL, we would be better off with PPP as the entirety of the loan would be forgiven and could be used towards payroll beyond just the 8 weeks and give us a bigger amount of forgiven money. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Yeah. But again, I do want to reiterate that people can apply for both. That 10,000 that was approved for EIDL, I mean, that's huge. And that they want to get that out, really quickly. So that could really be a saving thing for a business to get that grant.
Do you know if you can qualify if you have other outstanding non-SBA loans?
Yes,
Would that again be a credit score situation?
it probably would. I don't know the extent of the credit report that they pull, but I'm sure it would be on whatever the other obligations would be on whatever they're pulling.
If a small employer of less than a dozen for their salaried workers, one was laid off and then some were brought back to work, but at a 25% reduction in salary to stay
Okay.
open, can the loan help them make them whole and be forgiven?
Yes, in fact, that's what the whole purpose of it is to bring people back and get them back to what, at least what they were making. And you actually get a little penalized if you bring people back at a reduced rate. So yes, they definitely want you to bring people back at their salary that they were at before they were laid off. Am I answering that question?
Yes, you did. They were wondering, though, if your answer was no, if they could claim partial unemployment for the difference in pay.
You know, we've had some questions about unemployment because this person I was talking with yesterday was trying to get real creative with letting the people go on unemployment for a while and potentially getting more money than if he brought them back. And we've heard things about the enhanced unemployment as a result of COVID-19. And we really can't address those questions because we are not specialists in unemployment. You know, I've been hearing things about this $600 and all. So we really are referring people to the unemployment website. John Tully of the Department of Labor has been great. He's been my go-to person for questions. So you know, I can't really speak to unemployment questions. You know, so this person was thinking, like I said, about letting the people stay on unemployment to be able to to get some good paychecks from unemployment, and then he would bring them back. You know, hopefully, as when we get to the point where people can start ramping up again. It's it's a difficult situation because this program only goes through June 30, as I said, and the way it's looking, you know, we're potentially going to be in a position where a lot of things are still shut down for another, 3-4 weeks or more. So it's a difficult situation, but the whole idea certainly is to help people to get through this period and get people back to work. So hopefully the loan forgiveness through the PPP will help people to be able to bring people back and then have that loan forgiven for bringing the people back, rehiring them, and keeping them on.
This person's wondering if gig workers might be able to apply for PPP.
They should check with the bank, their local bank or whatever bank they go to. They should definitely look into that because I read that gig workers, qualify. But I actually had that question come up this morning. One of our advisors, it was asked of one of our advisors. I just said, just, certainly they would have to show, payments, 1099, a 1099. They'd have to show payments if they're a 1099 independent contractor. That's a question for the banks, and as I said, they don't really have all of their information yet. So that's TBD, to be determined. But I would definitely, if they're in that situation, start getting their records in order because they could very well qualify.
Have you heard about any turnaround time on the PPP? I know for the EIDL, I think it was about 3 weeks.
You're right. And I didn't mention it, but you're absolutely right, Renee. They do want to plan to have just a 3-week period for providing the EIDL loans. The PPP, I have not seen a time frame, so it may be up to the bank. The only time frame I saw was that 60 days to review and approve the request for forgiveness. I don't have a time frame for how long it'll take to get the PPP.
This person rebranded their name, but the new name is not on their taxes yet. Which business name should they use, or should they use both?
I think they need to make it clear, however they can do that, right in the application, because they'll want to just somehow make that clear. Yeah, that's definitely a unique situation. So, but they said the tax return has a different name.
Yes.
See, with these programs, with the EIDL, the tax return is no longer required. So that's a moot point. They can just put in probably their new name of the business for EIDL. For PPP, then they could just tell the bank, their bank, or, my tax return is this name, but, I had a different name before. So they would just explain that to the SBA reviewer if they were going for PPP.
And for those that are self-employed and they're the only ones on the application for number of employees, do they just put 0?
So it's just them.
Yep, they own a salon.
And the question is, how many employees?
Yes, that's one of the questions on the application, that they weren't sure if they should put 0 or 1.
I would put 0 because they don't have employees. It's just them as the owner.
Okay, thank you. This person applied for the EIDL loan through the SBA website on 3/25 prior to the recent streamlining and website changes and prior to approval of the stimulus package. Should I reapply through the new website application? I was assigned an SBA application number and EID number.
So for those people who did get their applications into EIDL before Friday's date, the 27th, she or he will be getting an email from the SBA, and they will be encouraged to apply at the new portal so that they can apply for that $10,000 advance, which turns into a grant. I have a copy of the email. It actually says, if you wish to apply for the advance on your EIDL, which I'm sure everybody would, please visit, and then the website, as soon as possible to fill out a new streamlined application. In order to qualify for the advance, you need to submit this new application, even if you previously submitted an EIDL application. Applying for the advance will not impact the status or slow your existing application. The answer is yes, please apply at the new portal.
Great, thank you. And I know with the old portal, you were able to save it and return later. Are you able to do that on the new one?
So they should, again, if they have other information, they can email customer service and referencing their application number. I don't know how else they can add, change their application.
Okay,
There
thank you.
isn't a way to do it online, to edit it.
Is there a way to save it and return? I didn't know if I was clear on that question.
Oh, that's a really good question. I did not see that capability.
Okay.
Good question. Good question.
Okay, so it sounds like you should do it in the one sitting, but if you
Yes,
do see a save
yes.
option to
So
utilize.
all the more reason to do what we've been saying right along, and that is get everything, prepared ahead of time. And that's these screenshots, I hope, will be helpful to people to be able to read ahead of time before going and going into the portal. They can have a good understanding of what's going to be coming up on each page. Real good question. Thank you.
This person's retail shop is owned by their corporation. They own the corporation. Who did they list as the owner?
So they are the owners of the corporation. So the corporation would be applying. And if they're the owners, there's a place for them to enter their owner information.
To double check, a small business owner could use an EIDL purely for mortgage payments and get a separate PPP loan and use that for funds purely for payroll.
Beautiful. They got it. That's it. That's the
Uh,
way to use these programs, people. Excellent.
if mortgage payments can be forgiven, can you make a larger payment on that mortgage to reduce operating costs?
Oh, you know what? I saw something about that. I think I read that they could not. Let me check on that. I don't know that they could do that.
Can you use the funds to pay off credit card debt for your business?
You cannot use EIDL to refinance loans. The funds are supposed to be for EIDL. Let's clarify. For EIDL, it's supposed to be for working capital. Other bills that could not have been paid had the disaster not occurred. So it's really for expenses that you have on a regular basis as for being in business. So that's why the, utilities, just other bills that you have for being in business. So for credit card payments, I don't know that that would be approved.
So with a seasonal business that did not have 2020 payroll until the week of 3/2/20 be able to use PP loan program. The business began in 2019, but not reopen this year until 3/4, so no payroll until then.
In figuring out how that works for a seasonal employee, that guide that I mentioned by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Small Business Guide and Checklist, it says for seasonal employees, average number of FTEs per month from last year, February 15, 2019 to June 30, 2019. They would be, utilizing an average number from the year before. They definitely are eligible to apply. So this is why these questions that are, those situations are a little different than the norms. So I guess we would recommend an offline conversation on that. And we have an advisor who actually has a seasonal business who will be getting very, very versed in all the particulars for when it comes to a seasonal business.
While you're looking that up, Zach, can you put in the chat the link to contact the SBA with questions on your application status? We had a few come in from people who submitted in between the first and current processes, and they want to verify that the SBA has received all the information from them.
Those people, I wouldn't even wait to, you're supposed to get that email. If they don't get an email, I would just go right ahead and apply again at the new portal.
Okay.
But they certainly, they're welcome to do what you just said, Renee, and email, or even try and call. Maybe they'd be able to get through. So that guide that I mentioned when it comes to seasonal employees gives some examples. So for the maximum loan for seasonal employees, 2.5 times the average total monthly payments for payroll costs for the 12-week period beginning February 15, 2019 or March 1, 2019, which is decided on by the loan recipient, and ending June 30, 2019. So you're looking at prior year's payroll to determine.
I know you covered this, but just to review, for businesses that were scheduled to open and now cannot, what would they qualify for? They're still required to pay rent coming up on buildings and they can't open.
So if they were already an established business but had not opened yet, they could apply. They would just have to show that all the expenses for starting up and all that they had to incur. It's just the businesses that weren't established yet that aren't eligible. So I would still, in that case, I would still apply. And that's what we keep actually getting back is telling people, just go ahead and apply. Go ahead and apply. And I hate to, make it simplistic like that, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. You want to at least try. So
Operating costs include inventory or just expenses?
expenses.
This person currently has lease payments on necessary equipment. Can they choose to buy them outright to reduce their monthly cash flow and include that in the EIDL loan?
See, what I'm reading is just the lease payments are eligible. I don't know if you could just pay off, a lump sum and submit that. But you're making a lease payment, so I would think that you could, because lease payments are covered. So whether, I haven't had that question before. We can submit it to SBA to be sure. Ventured, yes, but let us check to be sure before they make that lump sum payment to pay it off.
For community service organization, they don't have goods sold because they don't sell anything. Would they leave that as non-applicable?
Community service organization probably depends on what they do. So I wouldn't say unequivocally no that they aren't eligible. Again, they should apply and get clarification on that for what they do.
This nonprofit is not owned by any individual. We have a voluntary board of directors and an executive director. How do we answer the ownership question?
So if it's not applicable, I put not applicable because they've already put in the application if they're not for profit. So that will be understood why they're putting not applicable.
So someone had a question, you referenced at the beginning, debarment and not being able to work with them. They're curious what that is and how they would know.
So if they don't know, then they've never been debarred. So if you've been debarred, you do know. And for whatever reason, there are apparently companies that are on a debarment list and they've done something to cause them to be on that list, which is definitely not a good thing. The answer to that person's question is they are not debarred. If they would know if they're debarred. And there's actually a website that you can go to see who is or isn't debarred. So a couple of years ago, we were having to go there and check to make sure that everybody that we work with was not debarred. Now they just have it. It's a question that we have to ask everybody that we work with. So this is all, coming from the SBA, their rules and regulations, probably, some statutory ruling that specifies that they're not eligible. So I wasn't real surprised to see that. But tell that person not to, no worries, they are not debarred. And if anybody wanted that website to look up, I'd have to research that and find it.
If you apply for a loan and the advance but later decline the loan, do you still keep that $10,000?
You do. I couldn't believe, I read just this morning that even if you apply for EIDL and the $10,000 grant, you end up getting not approved for the EIDL, you still get to keep the $10,000. I couldn't believe that. Unbelievable. So yes.
This person has already applied through the new portal and also requested the $10,000 advance. They have not received a confirmation email yet. How long does that take? They submitted it yesterday.
Also, they submitted it at the new portal then, if it was yesterday, correct, Renee?
Yep, correct.
So they will not get an email. They just have that screen where it said successfully application submitted and your application number. So this is all they're going to get when they apply at the EIDL portal. The people that are going to get an email are the people that applied prior to this past week, up through Friday of this past week. We had some people who applied at a former portal, and they're the ones that are getting an email. So if you have this screen come up when you've clicked submit, you've clicked submit right here, and then you get that screen, I would even make a copy of this if you can, but by all means, just write down your application number because that's how you're going to communicate going forward with the SBA.
Is there a downside of applying for the grant? For example, are there tax implications for requesting it? Is it counted as income?
I don't know. That's another question we'll have to ask.
Do you need to wait until all of your losses have been incurred before you submit an EIDL loan application?
Absolutely not. Submit as soon as possible. And it's okay that you just have an idea of what your losses will be.
I think you covered this one, but I'll ask it to clarify. If someone has defaulted on an SBA loan, are they disqualified?
Not necessarily. What we've been told as far as that goes is what they're going to look at is, let's say they did default, but then they subsequently worked with SBA on a repayment plan and they're making regular payments on that repayment plan, that would actually bode well for them and would not necessarily disqualify them.
If an LLC has 3 members, whose credit score do they use to determine?
I don't know, but I would guess that if they are submitting all of the owner information, they could potentially run a report on all of them.
And you covered this one in previous ones, but maybe not here. Can the EIDL loan be prepaid without penalty?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Sure. Yeah, no prepayment penalty. And that's another reason why we've told people that if the SBA comes back and they say you're eligible for X amount of a loan for the EIDL, but the business owner doesn't feel they're going to need all that, we've recommended that people accept that because they can, just as you said, Renee, they can pay it all back or most of it back, whatever, and not have any prepayment penalty. I think that's actually a better scenario than having to go back and ask for additional funding.
Do you know if
Yes.
there's a special link or part of the application for women-owned businesses?
There is not. I've not seen, someone else asked that question as far as here in New York State, if you're a certified minority or women-owned business, does that give you preference? But that's, the MWBE program is a state program, and this is all federal that we're talking. There are advantages for women-owned businesses at the federal level for contracting. However, I do not see any preference for this EIDL program.
We have a few around the farming industry. It seems agriculture businesses are excluded from the EIDL. If that's correct, where would you direct a farm business?
Okay, so this is information that Shelby in our office gave to us. Okay, it doesn't say here who to, well, there is a fact sheet with a summary of the bill's provisions and implications for farmers. This fact sheet will be updated with new information as more details of the package are known. So let's see here. I'll check with Shelby. She knows about this. It usually goes through, it's, like I said, comes under the USDA, Department of Agriculture, but Shelby knows the different agencies. There's agencies that you work with that are specifically for ag businesses. I would have that person email us or get in touch with us, call us or email us, or there's a link at the Thinkubator website where they can also ask a question of us, because it definitely is different from the other types of businesses. So I'm trying to think of the name. Was it Farm Service Agency? I think Shelby's more up on this than I am. So if they would email us, we'll give them the right people to connect with.
Can you quickly go over what parts of the EIDL and the PPP are grants versus loans, in which ones you can apply for both of?
For EIDL, that's a loan, but you can apply for the $10,000, which ends up being a grant because you don't have to repay it. So it's like they're calling it an advance, but it doesn't need to be repaid.
Okay, so if I take out a loan for 20,000, it will end up being just 10,000. Is that correct?
Right, because you got the 10,000 extra. Yes. So that's, you know, they're using the word advanced, but other people are using the word grant. Actually, you can see the top of the slide there. It is an economic injury grant. So that's all that's, so for EIDLs, you know, up to $2 million, and then you can apply for this $10,000 grant. So now for PPP, that's up to 10 million, and you can apply for loan forgiveness. The loan forgiveness is eligible up to, well, I'm not sure. You apply for the 8-week period of payroll expenses, and that is what you would be forgiven. So this could be a lot more money, grant type of money, than the EIDL. But as somebody was very savvy and realized, you know, since both, if you're eligible for both, you can apply for both.
Does the 10,000 grant need to be repaid if you take the PPP?
No, it does not.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Roxanne, for clarifying on all
Renee,
of
if I could
these.
just mention, if people are waiting for a question or two from last week's, I have to check with Zach and see. We may have 1 or 2 people to still get back to, but just assure everyone that we will get back to them with answers. We've just been quite overwhelmed with requests for assistance and questions and all. So we're doing our best. We're working long hours and trying to get back to everybody in a real timely fashion, but it's just going to take a little time. So we appreciate everybody bearing with us.
Absolutely. And Roxanne, we appreciate you taking the time to answer all these questions and for the demos. And thank you, Zach, for sending in those links. Again, if you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to reply to your GoToWebinar registration email. I'm not a business advisor, but I will find the right place for your question. So don't be confused if I reply telling you I don't know. I will just be looking for the right person. I'll let you know in that email. So thanks again, Roxanne and Zach. We will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Renee, and thank you, everyone.